You included.
Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirted historian. This is a heck of a day, man. I tell you. So, we have Sandy Petersen with us today. And that's a big, big win for me. You know, I mean, I've had Mark Reinhagen on. I've had Sandy Petersen on. Will I someday get my unicorn, Mike Pondsmith? Well, you know, I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer. I got to get a few more, and I can get him. You know, I can start maybe making a play for it. I'll get big enough that even our Tal Soren will say, you know what, we could probably go on his channel. But this is cool. So my experience with Call of Cthulhu was kind of interesting because Call of Cthulhu is not the first book I bought. No, I was a wee lad in high school. And we had our local Walden books. And sitting on the shelf with all the role-playing game stuff that I checked out all the time when I would go into the mall was a copy of Cthulhu Now, which, you know, had a helicopter and a tentacle grabbing it and all this other stuff. I've still got it over there on my shelf somewhere. And I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, this is cool, because it had like stats for things like 50 caliber BMGs and all these other things. And I thought, oh man, I bet one of these things would put a dent in a monster pretty good. But, you know, I needed the base game to play it. So I ordered my Call of Cthulhu boxed set. And I still have it to this day. It's like 3 books. And that's just kind of where my whole love affair with Call of Cthulhu started. You know, I've read all of Lovecraft's work. Played Call of Cthulhu a few times. Not as much as I would like. I mean, you know, everybody gets busy and there's tons and tons of games. And Call of Cthulhu is really kind of like for a certain kind of player and for certain kinds of gaming. It really is. And I'll explain what I mean when I get Sandy back in here. So how about I stop talking and why don't we do that, huh? All right. We're going to have a good day. Hey, Mr. Petersen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Let me bring my panel in here. Mr. Grimm, Patty,
Hello.
Joel.
So, these are your cronies, or what's the relationship of all you four?
Oh no, cronies is a great word.
These guys, yeah, these guys are all game designers and writers on their own, as am I. I've worked a little bit in the gaming industry here and there, writing stuff and doing illustrations. Grimm has made all kinds of stuff. Joel just finished up his Kickstarter for one of his books, which is going to be great. And Patty's been doing his own thing too.
Okay. I guess I don't know any of you by your handles on this.
That's perfectly okay. We came here to know you.
Yes, okay, that's true.
You're surrounded by fans, sir. So, and sycophants.
Well, I heard your bemoaning earlier, and if it helps, I can. Every time I go to Gen Con, Mike Pondsmith and I go and hang out because we're buddies, and I can ask him for you.
Oh my God, would you?
Well, I mean, I've been in the industry so long that I know a lot of guys. It doesn't mean that they'll do whatever I say, you understand? But but like Mike and I have exchanged pictures of our kids and grandkids, that kind of thing. So,
Well, if we leave a good impression on you, maybe you can sell us on him, or you could sell him or us on him.
I didn't realize it was hard to get, but since he's just a guy I walk up to at Gen Con and say, "Hey, Mike."
Well, actually, that was why I bemoan not getting Mike on here, because I had an opportunity, because I was at Origins 93 back up in Dallas, and I was waiting in line for one of the events, and there he came. He was walking right up with Lisa right next to him, and I recognized him from his tag and everything else, and I was like, and me being the 22-year-old, totally, shy and fanboying and everything else, I totally clammed up, didn't say a word. He walked on by, and I missed my moment to say something to him.
I know exactly what you feel like, because in the 90s, I was at some conference where my company was getting a reward. I can't remember what it was, E3 maybe. Okay, and we go to the hotel, we're getting the award, and my boss, Tony Goodman, said, "Oh, Sandy, I want you to meet someone," and it was Shigeru Miyamoto.
Oh.
I just like, whoa! So I shook his hand, and I said something really retarded, like, I do games too, but I didn't know what to say anyway. So I got to shake his hand and talk to him very briefly, and then he went on his way. But so I didn't get to emphasize things like, I thought it was dumb to say, I did Doom and Quake, and I worked in, I'm trying to boost myself up. I didn't do any of that. I just was proud to talk to the guy. And at that time, I was most impressed by him, not because of his great works he done, well, that too, but because I had just recently been playing Pikmin. And in playing that game, I kept thinking, how the heck did Shigeru get the people at Nintendo to agree to this? It's great, but it's it would be so hard to pitch, Yeah. But I guess he had enough chops to do it, so good for him. Anyway, So I was staggered by Miyamoto, so I know what it's like to not be able to talk to someone.
Yeah,
it strikes me as one of those guys where it's like every once in a while he'll come up with a really crazy idea. Then it will be like, well, the last crazy idea made us $1 billion, so I guess try it. They just kind of roll the dice on it.
I mean,
little tiny people, size of ants, and you have a whole bunch of them. And they got to collect leaves. Trust me on this; it's going to be great. And they're just like, okay, you're the plumber guy. Okay, sure.
He's working in his garden, I guess, picking up crap and throwing it out. The whole game is
crap. Bulb comes on over his head.
a pink blob that eats everything. Why not? It's cute, right?
So you started out with Cthulhu Now. Well, I'm happy that I pushed that through at Chaosium then. And the reason I did is, I guess I'll tell a backstory, then you guys can chat about how much you hate my backstory. When I first started doing Call of Cthulhu, my natural impulse was it would take place nowadays. Well, of course, nowadays then was 1980, but it would be a modern thing. That's when horror is at its most keen, because every time you take a step away from something that the players can imagine themselves to be, then you have to work harder to make it scary to them, right? So for example, old Victorian horror, to make it real to them, you have to take an extra step than if you just have it be now. That was my feeling, right?
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I have something to comment on that. That's one of the reasons I bought Cthulhu Now, not only because it had all the cool guns, but also because I didn't know jack about the 1930s or the 20s, So, modern day seemed like it was doable.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. You don't have to teach them as much stuff. Like in the 1920s, you have to say, well, I mean, if you want to, you have to look up the gun laws, which, there weren't many, but or you have to figure out, how do I get to Europe? I can't take a plane there were air flights, but not many. Most everyone by ship, there's all these rules you have to put in. Whereas in 2025, if the players say, we need to get some food, you can just quick say, oh, there's a Greek hero place across the street or something, or whatever. Everything's easier to you don't have to explain stuff. Anyway, the thing is that in 1980, like Lovecraft was, if you heard about him, mostly you thought he sucked. Okay. Every person I knew who heard of Lovecraft had heard about him because I had told them. Okay. So he was not well known. There was a few, like Chaosium had heard of him, but they didn't tell me this, but they all thought he was a terrible hack. Okay. But here's the thing. Chaosium was very smart. Most companies, if they got the license to a product by a terrible hack, would do it and be all snarky about it. You know, kind of like with the Batman and Robin, where the bat nipples and he was making fun of Batman, mostly, right? And that's why all the fans hated it. But the director, Shoemaker, I think, wasn't it?
Schumacher, yeah.
Had this idea in his head. Well, I know that Batman's bogus, so obviously everyone smart will think he's bogus, so I should treat him as bogus in the movie, and then they will love me. But instead, we did not love him, right? And but Chaosium didn't do that. They said, we think that Lovecraft is a terrible hack, but if we do this game, we will snark on it and it will suck. We'll get Sandy, who loves Lovecraft and doesn't know that we think he's a hack, to do it for us, and he'll do it. Also, Sandy's never missed a deadline, which was something else they liked. Told me that after the fact, but I hadn't ever missed a deadline. Since then, I have missed some deadlines, I will admit. But anyway, so they do the game, and then they have another thought. They thought, for us to support this game, we are going to have to do expansions and handbooks and all this stuff. And for us to do that, we have to have something in the game that we love. And at that time, they weren't sure they could ever learn to love Lovecraft and his tentacle monsters. So what they hung their hats on was the 1920s. They said the 1920s are cool. It has flappers, and it has it has prohibition. It has gangsters. It has all this stuff going on that is cool, and we'll do that. So they set the game in the 1920s specifically so that they could maintain interest in Call of Cthulhu. And it worked. Now, I would play Call of Cthulhu, and my games were nominally set in the 20s, but I didn't do anything particularly 1920s about it. You know, I just said, you can go and buy a gun, because they had cars, they had phones, they had guns, same as we have now. I didn't have to change anything to make it work. Now, of course, eventually they decided that, in fact, Lovecraft was cool. And now, by that time, they were like too deep entrenched in the 1920s idea. So then I came along and said, let's do a Cthulhu now so we can have a modern version of it. And in fact, now I have a deal with Chaosium where they are still doing 20 stuff, as you know, and other things. Like they got Cthulhu Dark Ages coming out. I'm going to be releasing Call of Cthulhu original things by me. Yay!
Hey.
Licensed by Chaosium, that will be in the modern age. And so that's coming out hopefully this year. It's called Big C, and it starts off with in the meth trade in the Tri-City area of Washington State. And it turns out that the cult of Cthulhu is behind it, and it gets worse and worse, and ends up with the giant confrontation in a failed super collider tunnel that had been built.
Ooh,
you know, but we do have sidebars saying, hey, if you want to play this in the 20s, you can instead of meth, you can have it be booze. Instead of super collider tunnels, it can be a failed subway or something. You know, basically there's ways you can retcon it into your 20s campaign, but I think it would be a lot more fun in the 90s. So it's a hardback book, about 300 pages long, full color all the way through. It's going to be nice. If you've seen my stuff I did for Dungeons and Dragons for Cthulhu Mythos, it's like that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Anyway, that's my over lengthy story of why Cthulhu, so-called Cthulhu, is in the 1920s. And my logic behind this, their logic was Lovecraft wrote in the 20s, which is true. My logic was Lovecraft wrote in the most modern age available to him, and he had cutting edge. He wasn't trying to have all this quaint, hokey stuff. He was trying to do cutting edge science. He had submarines. He had air exploration of the Antarctic. He had the discovery of Pluto. He had ultraviolet rays. He was very advanced in his science for the time. So
Oh yeah, and he was inspired by like Verne and Hodgson and Poe too. So he could have done something that was like, and he was a huge historian. So like he was a huge
yes,
history
he
geek.
was a
He could have done
historian,
it.
and he loved old-fashioned stuff. But
He
it
could have, but
was
you're right.
modern. It was modern. To a lot of his modern horror guys harken back to the old times, or they uncovered evils from the old times. The history always mattered, but of course they can matter just as much in 2025.
Oh yeah, and he was contemporaries with guys like Howard, who did write about like the antiquated,
Oh, yeah.
like the antiquated world. So like he could have. You're right. He really was doing stuff of his time, like the most advanced he could get his hands on, like Verne did. That's great.
Yeah.
Howard was my boy because I live about an hour from Cross Plains, and I go down there and
Yeah.
visit the house every once in a while. And I've been down to Brownwood a few times to visit the grave site. But I grew up reading Howard.
I lived in Texas 31 years. I tragically was forced out this last summer. Well, my mom and dad begged and pleaded for me to come take care of them. They're in the 90s. Please, Sandy and your wife, come tend us. We're old. And at the same time, my last set of grandkids that live in Texas moved to Utah. So then I had 12 grandkids in Utah and 0 in Texas. So much as I love Texas, and I do love Texas, the call of the grandkids and of my parents in the 90s was stronger. So I tragically left Texas, and now I can't get a decent taco, and I can't get a decent steak. And I can't.
That's true.
And people look at me funny when I say y'all, which is one of the most beautiful words ever invented for English.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Totally.
It sounds like you're living in a modern horror story.
I am, man. Well, the thing is,
Yeah.
I actually have moved into my dad's basement where I grew up. So I like at my age, so I feel really stupid about that.
There you go. Call of the Parents, a new horror game.
Well, Sandy, be careful if you're in that basement and you come across like a letter from your great great grandfather. You know, don't go on any adventures to the sea or to the Arctic, please.
Many of my early formative nightmares happened in this house. So I mean, it's not haunted because it was built when I was 11. But well, that's not why it's not haunted. But it wasn't haunted when it was built, because how many new houses are haunted? We didn't have an Indian graveyard or anything here. At least I don't think so. It was in a place called Indian Hills.
Ironcaster Taco Bell is not real Mexican food. It's made by the Pepsi Corporation, for God's sakes.
I didn't. Who said who said it was real Mexican food?
Ironcaster.
Oh, seriously, dude? Come on. Look, you're talking to a guy that's eating chapulines in his tacos. So,
When I was
you know what that is.
When I was stationed in El Paso, there was this restaurant we used to love going to called the Old Place by the Graveyard, and it was built during the time of the Prohibition. So that was like one of my favorite things to run for my soldiers. I ran a lot of Cthulhu D20, but kind of like what you're saying is ground your players in something very relevant to them as a way to help build up horror, because you could twist their expectations of what they understand. And using a lot of pictures and some stuff that they had written about the Old Place by the Graveyard. Like I said, it used to be a speakeasy, so it was easy to get soldiers who were not at all introduced to Dungeons and Dragons to sit down and play a role-playing game, because I was able to ground it in a very real place to them, and they can connect with it that way.
Yeah, so there you go.
Let me just point out to Savo Kesselvang that the Picts and the Scots are not the same people. The Scots drove out the Picts. I mean, I'm sure there was some intermarriage, but the Picts were there before the Scots, and the Scots were victorious over the Picts. So there's no remaining Pictish group to be offended when we talk about how bad the Picts are.
Yeah. Plus, I think Conan himself is kind of modeled on like a Celtic, Irish, Scottish type person.
Well, he's a Cimmerian, land of dark.
Right.
His country is under the North Sea, so that's where Cimmeria was. So there's no Cimmerians left. Though I guess he's around. But Conan has black hair, so he would have been Black Irish.
Yeah.
Unless you buy the theory that they're descendants of the Spanish Armada.
Well, being a Spanish person myself, I think that'd be cool. But
well, I'm sure there was obviously some members of the Spanish Armada went into Irish culture, but I think there's too many Black Irish for whatever people landed from the Spanish Armada to actually have been, and how recent they landed to be a major influence genetically.
We have a really sharp audience here. Scotty, we're an Irish tribe that invaded Scotland. Doggerland is Samaria.
Yeah, Doggerland is pretty much what remains of Samaria. Yeah, I'll buy that.
I do have something I wanted to ask you, though, and this is something that I think Grim would probably want to ask you, too, about, because... Why
don't you make Grim ask it, then?
I don't know what he's talking about yet.
Exactly. But Grim and I have gone back and forth about this, and we kind of agree that aside from comedy, horror is the hardest thing to run in a TTRPG, which is why...
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah, which is why you have to have like mechanical systems like, insanity points or fear points or whatever that makes you lose control of your character, because the only way to really run horror properly, as far as I can tell, is your players have to be really invested in their characters and feel a sense of danger or imminent bodily harm or something that's going to happen to them that can't really be undone.
Well, I mean, paradoxically, you may not be all that vested in your character, yet you can still be horrified. Like, for example, when you're watching a slasher movie, I mean, we all agree there's nothing wrong with dead teenagers, right?
Exactly.
Seeing how the masked killer goes about murdering these oafs. Let me tell you how Sanity came to be. And you can see, so I started out doing a game called, just for me and my friends, called American Gothic. And then I started talking to Greg Stafford. It never got published. Started talking to Greg Stafford of Chaosium about doing a horror game. They wanted me to do a game based on Lovecraft. Originally, we were calling it Dark Worlds. So, and then I loved the name Dark Worlds. So for like 40 years, I kept trying to get the name Dark Worlds into a game. And I finally did it with one of my D&D scenarios a couple years ago. But anyway, so I'm writing up Call of Cthulhu and trying to make a horror, and there's tentacle monsters and scary things. And then I came up with this. I noticed that in the stories, heroes are constantly fainting or going insane permanently or running. They're suffering their sanity loss, right? And so I thought, I think I will give the monsters an additional weapon, which is the sanity stat. And so when you see a monster, well, you know how the sanity system works. You roll your dice and you lose, right? If you lose too much sanity, it's bad for you. So my theory in my innocence was that this would be an extra weapon of the monsters. So like you could, just like the monsters could hit you with the tentacles or they could cast spells or whatever, they could also the more scary monsters would cause a sanity loss. And that's how I saw it as. So the first time I tested sanity, this is in Davis, California, where I was going to school. I get down with my players, and they all understand how sanity works, and they're going down to the basement of the scenario in The Haunting, which is the very first scenario ever run for Call of Cthulhu, and it's still available. And that killer bed has knocked off so many players out of the second window. But that scenario, incidentally, is purposely not very Lovecraft oriented. It's basically this mummified body in the basement that's casting evil spells. And I did that to show that you don't have to have Cthulhu stuff in Call of Cthulhu. Anyway, so the players are down there and they're getting ready to cast a spell. They found a spell in an old book and they thought that the spell, which I called Summon Malign Entity from Beyond, which I don't know why you'd ever cast that. And they thought it might summon the monster in the house and they could, I guess, fight him or something. I'm not sure where their minds were. It's not my job to understand what the players are doing, right? It's my job to give a situation that the players experience. That's my principle as a game master. So they're casting the spell, and I'm trying to make it cool. And I see, you hear a grating in the air, and then like a rectangular opening appears, and a claw starts coming through. And what the spell actually did was it summoned a monster called a Dimensional Shambler, which is a mid to lower level monster. It's pretty cool because it can walk between the dimensions, but it's just, it's like the equivalent of like an ogre or something in D&D, Mm-hmm. So it's coming through, and all at once the players did something totally expected. One of the players said, "I'm covering my eyes," Another said, I'm running up the stairs to get out of here. Listen, I'm going to the corner and turning my back to it, going like this. And I sat there, I just like, you would never do that in D&D. Nobody would ever want to know what's going on. They have knowledge is power, right? But these players, they were acting as if their characters were afraid because they were because of the sand rule. And I thought, I mean, I'm not sure the players were afraid, but they were behaving like they were afraid. And I was smart enough to say, I'm onto something here. I'm going to keep this mechanic. It really works. It makes players act afraid. And so you're right. You do need that extra mechanic. And I think and I've gotten a lot of that sanity rule, even though it was maybe partly serendipitous, I didn't realize what it was going to do, has really been useful in doing that. You can control so much as a game master, I should say keeper, by the use of sanity. As a side note, I went to Japan a few years ago where, by the way, so normally, when someone says I'm big in Japan, what they're really trying to say is I suck everywhere else. Call of Cthulhu was genuinely big in Japan, as in it's bigger than D&D.
Yeah, it is.
In Japan are Call of Cthulhu. I mean, why would they play D&D? Wizards and knights and our kind of dragons aren't their fantasy world, right? But tentacle monsters, that's right up their alley. So,
literally.
Also, you may have noticed that even in America, there's a higher percentage of girls that play Call of Cthulhu than okay. I think it's because.
Oh, wait, hold on. Were all of the goth girls that all the dudes playing Vampire were trying to get playing Call of Cthulhu?
Well, Vampire the Masquerade may have even more, right? But
I don't believe it.
Call of Cthulhu, my experience was that a typical D&D game has like, out of every 10 guys, there's like 2 girls, and one of them is there because her boyfriend plays. Maybe there's one there on her own. Call of Cthulhu was more like 25-30% are girls. Okay, which of course is right, and I think it's because the common role playing mechanic is I kill a bad guy, I get stuff, loot or experience, I level up, I go kill a bigger bad guy, I level up, I go kill a bigger bad guy, and that's the cycle, right? And it's a compelling cycle, which is why every game uses it. Every game except that is Call of Cthulhu. Where you don't want to fight the monsters, you want to run away from them, you're trying to use your brains. Your big confrontation is pouring concrete down the old well or something, and so girls like horror stories, right? And so maybe more than they like action movies. Anyway, it attracts more women. So in Japan, but in America, to come to play Call of Cthulhu, first you must pass through the gatekeeping of D&D because everyone plays D&D first before they go to any other game. Okay, so that weeds a bunch of them out. All right. Now, in Japan, they don't have that gatekeeping thing. And as a result, 70% of the players are women. And not only does it do well in Japan, Call of Cthulhu sells better in Japan than the rest of the world combined.
Wow.
Holy smokes, dude.
So the average player of my game, Call of Cthulhu, is an 18 to 35-year-old Japanese woman. So one of my goals in going to Japan, which I didn't know before I went there, one of my goals was to make my wife jealous with all the cute Japanese girls that were like bowing to me. I failed. My wife just laughed at me, But I did give a speech about the origin of Call of Cthulhu, which was translated and then of course because how else could they understand me? And then I made my wife stand up and I said I couldn't have done any of Call of Cthulhu without my wife's support. She's the best, and she got a round of applause. And then afterwards, I got I was interviewed by I think a webzine, a TV station, and a radio podcast or something. And they started asking me these questions. They said, so is it true that Wendy developed the sanity system? Because I talked about the sanity system. Then I said, I got Wendy. And I said, what? And then I decided to go with it. So I reported, yes, Wendy developed the sanity system, which just so you guys know, she does not game hardly at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
But she talked to her friend Chizuko from Japan, said, can you look up and see if I really says I designed it? And she looked, yeah. So Wendy is now credited with designing the sanity system in Japan.
Did you also test that system on you very often? Testing your sanity?
Well, I think I'm more of a weight on hers, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gotta say, if I may, because I'm like a sucker for long relationships and loving relationships, and it's very refreshing to see your posts, doting and loving on your wife. I always show them to my wife all the same time. Like, look, that's gonna be us in a couple of years.
Best. I will
Shall
say
make her
that
demands obeisance.
for Valentine's Day, I chose for my Valentine a 10-year-old granddaughter, so she was very excited to be my Valentine, and I got a kiss right here on the cheek from her. So,
Oh, nice.
Very nice.
so anyway, Call of Cthulhu. It's there. You go, folks. If you don't have a significant other, Call of Cthulhu is the way to get them.
There you go.
I mean,
I
never
girls
got
like horror.
because by the time I
Step 2, run Call of Cthulhu. Easy.
It's funny that you say that. Been reading biographies of some comic authors here in the UK, like Pat Mills and so on, who's most famous for 2000 AD. But he also used to write for girls' comics. And he also used to be involved in Misty, which was a girls' horror comic. And he just said, to write for girls, just make everything really miserable. They love it. Maybe that's where some of this joy in horror comes from.
Well, I have noticed that a lot of when I was growing up, the teen fiction was more boy-oriented, and there was a lot of fighting the bad guys going on, or mystery stuff. And with the girl ones, there's more like dystopias and complex distressing relationships and stuff. As a boy, we don't care about relationships, right? I mean, let's face it. Our idea of a relationship is he's the bad guy, I have to fight him, rather than I have to work with this person to find some kind of solution, which the girls like. And I've noticed that as teen fiction has gone more and more girly, so to speak, and guys and kids, boy kids, have stopped reading so much. I mean, you can still find this stuff for them, but it's rarer, because I can't imagine very many boys really enjoying Twilight. On the other hand, Harry Potter works for both sexes, so there's that.
Okay. I got two things from my ear trumpet here. Mercurius. He says Mr. Max would say that comedy is the hardest genre to GM, having seen one of his live plays.
You actually preceded your rant about horror by saying that. You said comedy was harder.
Well, I mean, I did.
I'm not disagreeing.
No.
Comedy's hard.
I mean, comedy is harder, but I ran Ghostbusters. That was one of my first games.
I got an award for that game system.
It was a great game. It was a lot of fun. It was easy to run, and I think it was almost kind of like the nucleus of the Star Wars system.
It not just kind of, they absolutely stole it for the Star Wars system. But you can't copyright a game system, so I'm fine with that. And it's been used recently for like Three Musketeers and all kinds of stuff. It's a very it's a very flexible system. So here's how Ghostbusters came to be. So West End comes to us in the mid 80s, and Eric Goldberg, who is a buddy of mine who worked for West End, says he's so much a New Yorker he never has owned a car or learned to drive because the cars are useless in New York. That's how much New York he is. So he says, we want to do a Ghostbusters game, and we want Sandy Petersen to design the game because he did Call of Cthulhu. And we're talking, and he made a big insult to me, which was where he said, "So what have you done since Call of Cthulhu, Sandy?" and implying that I was a one-shot wonder. And I thought about it, and I'd done a couple other things, but really he sort of had a point. I hadn't done anything major. I'd done adventures and other things and worked on RuneQuest 3. But I hadn't done much, so I kind of think, wow, maybe I've shot my bolt. Maybe that's all I had to give. But I denied it in front of him, of course. I said, well, I'll give this thing my all. And it turned out that what Eric Goldberg and his team actually wanted, they wanted us to do a scary horror game like Call of Cthulhu. And I said, well, I mean, Ghostbusters is like totally a comedy, I mean, it's a comedy with horror elements. I mean, there's horror with comedy elements. Which is different, I think, than comedy with horror elements. The difference might be, but you can tell them apart, right?
Oh yeah, well, Evil Dead's a horror with comedy elements, and Evil Dead 2 is another good example. And Ghostbusters is an inverse of that. The comedy is primary and the horror is
Yes,
secondary.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right, the greatest horror comedy I know is a movie called Mr. Vampire, which you should all run out and find.
Oh, dude, Mr. Vampire rules.
Oh my gosh, that movie rocked my world. So good. There's like 20 sequels to it by different guys, and because it was Hong Kong. But Mr. Vampire, it's the thing. Anyway, so basically I displeased West End by making Ghostbusters funny because they wanted it.
Oh.
But by winning the award and having the game actually be successful, I did prove to myself that I wasn't a one-shot wonder. And then I never again worried about that.
Nice.
Yeah. I loved Ghostbusters. The only other comedy games I can think of besides Toon, which is pretty obvious, but there's Paranoia.
Yeah.
Paranoia is pretty funny, though.
Paranoia is pretty funny.
It drives comedic gameplay because you're incentivized just to be an absolute weasel in that game. It's so much fun.
Oh, and there's one more, actually, that tops them all. Tales from the Floating Vagabond. He knows it. He knows.
I have run 2 LARPs in the Tales of the Floating Vagabond universe. Okay, with one of them had 140 players, so I'm familiar with Tales from the Floating Vagabond.
Holy crap!
140 players, Lord, man.
How?
It was a LARP. We had a hotel. We had 2 floors that we gamed on, and there was a big central open area. So we'd run around the halls and into the rooms, and I was one of the game masters, and we had to give all the characters. There was characters that were we had to make plots for everyone well ahead of time. There was a team of 6 of us, and we were writing like crazy to get all these plots organized, and it went really well. We learned a lot about how to run certain kinds of games and what makes people happy. Like the happiest I ever saw a guy in it was this guy was playing the Red Skull. Okay, and he managed to pull off killing Bucky, which he was super proud of. Okay. And so, the next morning, that afternoon, Captain America arrests him, and they take him on trial with Judge Wapner, who's right? and they have this whole show trial, and the Red Skull is like Sieg Heiling and talking about the master race and all this crap, and they sentence him to death. And then eventually they march him off against the wall, and he's shot by firing squad with one final Sieg Heil, and so Red Skull is killed, and he had the most fun of anyone in that entire game. Right? His show trial and all that, he won by being executed. Right? And I learned, okay, that's what players want. They want to have the big moment, not just to survive. And I think that is actually part of the secret of Call of Cthulhu. If your character's last thing is driving a truck full of explosives into the old mine to stop the horror, and you are dead, that's still cool.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you're familiar with the Old Man Henderson story, right? Like that's a legendary piece of game fiction that's just basically one guy's experience playing a suicidal old man in Call of Cthulhu. I got something there. There's real. There's something there where it's like it's not whether or not you survive; it's just kind of whether or not you leave your mark.
I will say something else that I think is irrelevant, which is that Call of Cthulhu is this dark, spooky, horror, nihilistic game where the whole world's going to end, and yet I have had so many games of a brief, like not break up, but stop as we're all laughing our heads off.
Yeah,
you don't need to do a comedy game you can do it in any other game. You can do it in D&D or whatever. But any game, if you have the right team of guys, there is comic stuff happening, and the right kind of players. And of course, you can't necessarily repeat any of this to a later person because it was in the moment that everyone is laughing at what this guy did. That you blew off your hand, and everyone laughs about it. and so I always kind of felt that comedy games are fine, nothing against them. I mean, I did Ghostbusters, right? But you can get plenty of comedy in a non-comedy game. And if Call of Cthulhu can do it, then which it does, like frequently, maybe it's because it's so dark, that anything that's a little bit hilarious, gets everyone laughing. I was playing the game in Germany, and maybe because Germans don't know anything about guns, guy, he basically walked into Dracula's office, Okay. And Dracula's office is dirt floored, and there's a desk, and there's like a coffin, and Dracula comes out, and he's floating around the room and scaring the guy. So the guy pulls a gun, and he's trying to shoot Dracula. And I'm like, "You're shooting Dracula with a gun?" "Yes." I said, "Have you like never seen any vampire movies?" This is a confirmed method of not killing a vampire. But he shot him, and he hit every time because he's a great shot with a gun. And he kept shooting him, and he kept going on until he emptied his gun into Dracula. And I kept every time he'd shoot, I'd give him an alternative thing to do besides shoot Dracula, and he never did. So what could I do? Dracula ate him, and the other players are just rolling on the floor, dying, and he's dead serious. "I'm gonna get him with my gun."
Oh no! I thought he was going to say Germans don't know anything about humor.
German humor is very different from American humor, and I believe more limited, based on the jokes my German friends have told me. But
Well, ask them to march, and they're experts.
Oh, well,
all
right.
That was a Daniel Tosh joke. Sorry, I stole that.
It was.
That's okay, because I think the extra the extra humor that Germans would have had otherwise has been moved to Scotland or somewhere.
Oh God, the Scots are funny.
Those guys slay me.
Oh, seriously, yeah. I spent like the entire day Thursday just looking at Scottish Twitter and laughing my ass off. But
yeah, I got this guy. So a few years ago, this guy was turning 50, and he emailed me and said, "I have my 50th birthday, and I'm kind of rich. And would you want to come to the party? Because I love your games." And he said, "I know you probably won't be able to," and yada yada. I said, "You kidding? Fly me and my wife, and we'll have a great time." And we did, and we drove all over Scotland. I got to go to Castle Glamis, which is the most haunted. I guess it's the most haunted place in Great Britain now since Exham Priory burned down. But and I got to go. I got to sail on Loch Ness. How great is that? A dream of mine as a kid. And but yeah, he was really funny. So.
Well, I got a question here from Mercurius that I need to get around to, and it's a super chat. So he's paid me $5 Australian. So let me throw you a media clip just to kind of get us in the mood. What do we got? What do you think? Watermelon on our feet, or? Oh, wait a minute. I think I retired that one.
Do you have any horror ones?
Do I have any horror ones? Jeez.
Oh yeah, dude.
I have horrible ones. Is that the same thing?
You need to get the one of Bruce Campbell wasting the evil witch, and he just
yeah.
The cutter at the end is my favorite.
That was pretty funny. Yeah. How about this one? This is kind of horrible.
Well, I will say that Lord of the Rings is a heroic fantasy with horror elements at points.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Okay, that's I think Grim's favorite topic.
About this, I've been trying to put off this question because I don't think my ear trumpet is going to feel that he got his money's worth. And here's the reason. You see, Call of Cthulhu is like my house rules for playing Call of Cthulhu. And so I don't play other people's Call of Cthulhu games because I have my house rules. And so I don't know very much about the Cthulhu mythology of Delta Green. I've seen a little tiny bit of Delta Green, and it seemed okay. I'm always, of course, kind of, man, I wish I guess Delta Green was still doing it under license from Chaosium, so I would get a tiny bit of money from it. But hey, it is what it is. Lovecraft's public domain now. So I really don't know what to think about the Cthulhu mythology of Delta Green. That's a very disappointing answer, and I think you should give him back his $5, but you won't.
Yeah. Well, I got to get paid too. I don't make that much money on this channel.
That's another question. I'll immediately answer it in my guilt for not knowing anything about Delta Green. I know it's time. I know it's a group of guys that are kind of semi-government oriented that go to kill the monsters. And that was a common feature that we got in some of the, like in Chill and some of the other early horror games that tried to compete with Call of Cthulhu. And I didn't want that. I said, the players can form their own organization to fight the monsters. I don't want them to have some kind of government or whatever organization setting it up for them. And for better or worse, that's what I stuck to. I mean, obviously, a government organization is useful in a couple of ways. One is that you can give one of the troubles in Call of Cthulhu is trying to find how the players will discover some terrible thing. Like the first part of every adventure was kind of awkward. Why are you getting together? What's going on? How'd you find out about this? Why are you going to investigate it? All that kind of stuff. And Call of Cthulhu, and having a government organization helps you solve that problem. And also, of course, you can have the government organization be corrupt, and then you have to root out bad guys in it. But that kind of goes into more spy stuff than Call of Cthulhu stuff.
So
well, he's got
more like the laundry file.
Call of Cthulhu, you bastard.
I was about to say Grim could probably sympathize with you on
Cthulhu, but not the big guy himself, huh?
Grim could probably sympathize with you on the loss from Delta Green because he pretty much got shafted out of Munchkin.
Yeah. Oh well.
Steve Jackson once told me that he doesn't really care for Munchkin, but whenever the company's getting low on money, he does another Munchkin, and then they get a bunch of money, and you can keep the company running.
Yeah, and I don't, bastards.
Well, dude, if you're involved with Munchkin, you got no sympathy for me.
Well, I wrote the original Munchkin's Guide to Power Gaming with my writing partner, which kicked off the whole thing.
Oh, not the card game, the power gaming guy.
No, the card game, the guy.
Oh yeah. Okay, you're forgiven then. But like my grandkids of a certain age, they're like, Grandpa, let's play a game. I go, sure, let's play. And they pull out Munchkin. I'm like, oh Lord, not Munchkin.
Well,
the point is not to have a game that's fun. The point is to play with the grandkids. But,
if I was getting money from the card game, I would welcome your hate.
Well, I mean, there's been two good Cthulhu card games. There's the Call of Cthulhu card game from Fantasy Flight, and then there was the old Mythos card game.
Oh yeah, Mythos.
Didn't that almost bankrupt?
Mythos was a great handicap that was almost impossible to build a deck.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, Archer Collin has a question for you. He says there are Cthulhu references in Larry Niven's Dream Park book. Are any of the panel familiar with the series? I know about it only because of Cyberpunk.
When it came out, I was super impressed, and then later on, it kind of became a reality with MMOs. Not quite the same, but yeah, I loved it. I've actually used the plot of Dream Park, and in fact, I'm using it right now. Not the overall plot of the murder mystery, but the plot that was in the game in Dream Park with the cargo cult. I've been using that in the tabletop fantasy game I'm running right now. And none of the players have read it, so like they all think I'm super smart. Don't tell them.
Yeah.
The reverse fire thing, the fire that burns ashes back into wood and furniture and stuff. If you have read Dream Park, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, maybe that'll make you want to go read Dream Park.
I should read it, considering I'm a big fan of Westworld,
I
mean the original movie.
Not super long. Okay, and unlike Westworld, Dream Park is actually a game they're playing. And in fact, at one point, they have a chance to solve the murder mystery. But if they do, it will wreck the game, and the game's really important. So they go on with the game. There's more than one book of Dream Park. I only read that one book. I guess it makes sense if it was successful, they would do more. But I will say this: the first book is a thing in itself. There's it doesn't end in a cliffhanger. You can read it and be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, the funny thing is how you and I got talking was not about Cthulhu, but it was about Microprose of all things, which growing up, I played all the Microprose games that came out, and I think you worked on quite a lot of them, especially the ones that I played.
From 1988 to 1993, that was what I did. Then in 1993, Bill Staley went like bonkers, and the company started falling apart, and people started vanishing, and I was one of the vanishees.
But you went on to work at id Software?
Well, I landed on my feet. I'm not arguing, Just as my severance pay ran out, I got the job at id Software, and they were doing Doom, and then things went well,
to say the least.
Yeah, I've still got my original. I think it's 3 or 4 3.5-inch floppy disks of Doom that I bought straight from id because I was so stoked about it when I got to play the demo.
Hey, it was great.
Was great.
We were way too generous with the demo. The demo was 9 levels. What the heck? What were we thinking?
Mm-hmm. It was like almost the entire first campaign.
It was, in fact, the entire first episode.
Uh-huh.
And then you'd pay and you get two more 9-episode things. So you had a third of it, you get 2/3 more. And it helped if you hadn't heard about Deathmatch, because if you have Deathmatch, you don't do anything, right? You just play Deathmatch forever.
Well, I remember actually episode 2 was my favorite because fighting the cyber demon and the music and everything was just like, this is peak. It doesn't get any better than this. And of course, we got to episode 3, and I was right.
I did every single level in episode 2 and episode 3. So if you like episode 2 best,
I do.
I did 2 episodes. I had 2 of the episodes in 2 of the levels in episode 1. And I did all of them in episode 2 and all in episode 3. Well, some of them had been previously worked on by Tom Hall, but then I had greatly remodeled them, and like he would give them to me, and a lot of them only had the silver texture, or but that wasn't his fault. That's all he had to work with.
Well, I mean, Doom is still popular even now. I mean, they're about to release Doom: The Dark Ages at some point this year, and I'm super stoked about that.
I mean, they've upgraded the gameplay and the models, of course.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't guess you're getting any residuals from any of that, are you?
That would chunk on the ground, like walk.
Yeah.
Walking animations. It was crude stuff.
Yeah, but that was great though. I mean, for the time, especially. I mean, it's like you guys did so much with stuff that we wouldn't have expected. I mean, like I remember doing some research on Diablo, which was my other big favorite game at the time. And I read that they were using like crude claymation and stuff for some of the animations and stuff. And I was just kind of like, really? So
incredible.
Well, the way we did our monsters for Doom was we had this guy building them out of latex and metal, making. So we had actual models about this high, about a foot high of the characters. Oh. We put it on a turntable, and we took photographs in 8 directions, and then scanned those photographs onto the computer, and then cleaned them up, and that was how we did our sprites. The models long ago died of rubber cancer, but
rough.
But that's how it was done. And the real secret of Doom wasn't that it was this amazing. I mean, it was a decent game, obviously, but that it was the very first game to break the barrier of single player, and that people played deathmatch a lot. Before Doom, no one played head to head, or very rarely. And after Doom, it became so common that now designers have to explain why they don't have head to head if they don't.
Well, for me, Wolfenstein did not grab me, but Doom grabbed me because, one, it was dark, the subject matter was gory.
Yeah, we had lighting changes.
Uh-huh.
We had a floor and a ceiling. There's no floor and ceiling in Wolfenstein. It's just like a gray, endless gray haze.
Yeah.
And also the variety of weapons. Wolfenstein, go from a crappier weapon to a better weapon. It just is a chain up. But in Doom, like there's a difference between a shotgun and the chain gun.
Mm-hmm.
Some are better for one enemy, some are better for the other. You have to pick. A rocket launcher has a certain purpose. So there's
and the sound design was so good. But I tell you what got me.
The sound design was terrific in Doom.
I was one of those souls who was really super duper into gaming, and I had a PC for this. I actually, cobbled together enough money, and I bought a Roland MT32 sound card.
Wow.
To drop into my machine. So I got to hear Doom, the music on that Roland, and it was amazing. It was like cinematic. I
gotta say, most of my playing on Doom, there was no music because Bobby Prince hadn't written it yet. So I'm just, I heard the monsters roaring and stuff. We had those sound effects, but we didn't have the music in. When it started going in, I was playtesting to the end of the project. It was like, wow, this kicks ass. I love this music.
Well, to this day, I think that's one of the reasons why episode 2 is my favorite, because when you are fighting the cyber demon, the music track that plays in the background is so iconic to me. It's like I can still hear it in my head after all these years.
Best boss ever.
Yes.
And so here's another fun fact. So we played the game. Every level I played starting with a pistol, because that's if you got killed. So I had to make sure every level was playable with a pistol. So I just got used to playing every level starting with a pistol. So I never accumulated extra stuff from the previous level. Because I just go right to the level. I have a pistol. I go through it. Yeah, I was able to with this level. So I was always looking for the rocket launcher. But I didn't realize that a real player would always have a rocket launcher because he got it back in level 4 or something. And he would just never have lost it because he would save and restart. You know, he would have all this crap. And so because of that, I didn't realize that the Cyber Demon was actually much more dangerous than the Spider Monster, the Spider Mastermind. Because if you start with just a pistol on the Spider Mastermind level, he's horrendous. But no one ever did. Everyone goes there with 200 rockets and a rocket launcher and blows them up. And he's still kind of a threat, but not as bad. If I'd realized but since I only ever played it, I didn't know as much about playtesting then as I got to learn later. Like I did most of the playtests at Ensemble Studios, ran them for the Age of Empire series.
Oh gosh!
So I got really good at balancing RTS games, and I've used that in my tabletop games like Cthulhu Wars.
Oh my god! Yeah,
I remember you about that. Yeah.
I worked in a video game and RPG store back in the 90s. And so we always had PCs with games on them running because we were trying to sell PCs as well as games. And when we discovered Age of Empires, I remember throughout the store, since we had always had somebody like an employee or a guest or somebody playing on the machines, we'd always hear "Wololo, wololo." You'd be like, "Oh, go find that dude, kill him now."
We got so many sales by people simply watching the early part of Age of Empires and seeing a lion run and take down a gazelle. And they would say, "The lions can kill the gazelles? I need this game." That sold them, you know. And the priests, of course, were fabulous. It got plugged by reviewers as a cross between Civilization and Warcraft. But of course, it is just Warcraft. You know, it's not Civilization. Warcraft.
Hey, Ironcaster.
The historical verisimilitude. We got someone new.
Yep,
Hello,
that's
yes.
Ironcaster.
Yeah, life kind of gets a little crazy sometimes, and I was able to make it when I can. But it's sometimes you never know when you're going to expect to get taken out by a lion.
Yeah, just randomly.
Well, the predators or the wild boars are a thing to worry about. You know, in Age of Empires, that was, we thought, part of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was curious, having gone from designing RPG games and then going into game development and working in that for a couple of years, and then like your work on Whisper in the Dark, and then going back to developing RPG games, how has the way that you've interacted with and created tabletop role-playing games, video games, movie experiences and such, now that you're creating them now, what are the top 3 things that you've been able to translate from industry to industry?
Well, first, let me poo-poo my skill in movie industries, because what happened with that was I praised H.P. Lovecraft's Historical Society did the Call of Cthulhu silent movie, which I loved. I wrote them and said, "You guys rock. Let me know if you ever do anything else like this, if I can help in any way." So then they did the Whisper in Darkness, and they'd run out of money. And at that time, I was somewhat flush, and they said, "We need some money to finish the soundtrack." Which, if you watch the Whisper in Darkness, it's an amazing soundtrack. And so I said, "Well, let me see the movie first." So I went down to their shop, and I got to see all the little models of the monsters and the model of the barn and all this stuff, and the airplane that they fly around in the big scene in the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
They had that there. It's 3/4 scale, so that's why it's so cramped.
Oh, wow.
But so they showed me the movie with special effects not in there, no fake sound for the music, and I watched it and I said, if I lose every dime, I'm willing to do it to get this movie out there because I love it so much. And I didn't lose every dime. I lost a lot of the dimes because an evil company from Canada, of all places, ripped them off. Took we'll be your exclusive distributor, and they took all the DVD, sold them all. Then they said, "We're bankrupt, no money for you." But they have been slowly trying to pay me back. But that's why they haven't done any other games. But the thing is, what I found out, I'm listed as executive producer on Whisper in Darkness, and I found out exactly what an executive producer does, which is nothing.
Yeah, pretty much.
That was my My interaction was, this movie looks great. Here's some money. Please put me in somewhere besides executive producer. So wait till the very end. I'm also one of the brain cylinders.
Oh, nice.
The one that they do. Anyway, so anyway, that was my movies. So my main interaction with movies is I watch them. But I have done role-playing games and computer games, shooters, RTS, and then board games. So I've interacted with almost every and LARPs. So almost every part of the gaming world, except I guess card games. But I've done phone games, and for 2 years at SMU, Southern Methodist University, for those not in the South, I taught game design to graduate degrees. And so you could have learned how to design video games from me if you'd gone to the Guild Hall at SMU during that period.
I wish. I tell you what, when I was really heavy duty into my board games buying phase, Cthulhu Wars popped up, and God, I wanted it so bad. But on my budget, it was just kind of like, there's just no way I can get this. But
here's my argument. Obviously, you don't have to have every game be a luxury, fancy product. But just as it's okay once in a while to go out and have steak instead of Taco Bell, or occasionally, like maybe you have a Cadillac instead of a Yugo, it's okay for a gamer to have 1 or 2 luxury games on their shelves. And if so, why couldn't one of them be Cthulhu Wars?
In my case, I ended up with Kingdom Death Monster, but
that's even more expensive than Cthulhu Wars. What the heck, dude?
Yeah, no, but that one sucks you in. You can't get out.
It does. It's the most heartless game ever.
Our company helped the guys at Kingdom Death Monster figure out how to distribute their product. We are helpful to other people in the industry as best we can.
I do actually have a few Cthulhu Wars models because I got lucky and I won some raffles and stuff from another guy's channel. So I at least have the experience of painting them.
The reason the figures are so big is because I demanded that they be 28mm scale so that I could use them in my Call of Cthulhu games. And so we
long con
figures separately for like D&D or whatever or Call of Cthulhu. I think they're the official Call of Cthulhu miniatures. So I am the most extensive producer of Cthulhu type figures in the world, except I don't have very many humans. I only have I have cultists, and that's it.
Well, actually, have you heard of Simon has been doing Cthulhu Death May Die, and
I know where.
Yep, and they're doing 28mm. I have the Great Cthulhu, which is massive.
Models are more extensive than theirs. That's all I'll say. I have figures for things that they have not dreamed of having. Glocky and Gatanathoa. Will you stop showing off evil other companies' stuff? Every person that buys Death May Die is a person that doesn't enjoy the greatness of Cthulhu Wars. Okay, here's why
Cthulhu Wars, though.
Here's my pitch for Cthulhu Wars being great. Okay, first, although it looks like one of those giant games that takes forever to play, among experienced players, a 4-player game is about an hour and a half.
Oh,
it's fast. You can play it a couple times a night. Second, the factions are really, really different. Like if you learn how to play as Great Cthulhu and then you switch over to try Black Goat, tactics that work with Great Cthulhu will not work with Black Goat. It's like a whole new game. For that matter, even if you're still playing Great Cthulhu, but the guy who used to play Black Goat is now going to play the Sleeper, it's a whole new game because the Sleeper functions utterly differently from Black Goat. And so that is... it's endlessly expandable. And the third reason to buy it is that it gives me money.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Because I admit. But,
You did that. What, you released another board game. I think it was like Hellbound or Hellscape or something.
Planet Apocalypse.
That's the one.
That's the one. Planet Apocalypse, unlike Cthulhu Wars, is a co-op. And it takes about 2 hours to play. A little longer than Cthulhu Wars, but it's a co-op, so you're not waiting for your turn exactly. And it's about hell rising up, just like every holy book the world's ever had says one day hell's going to come and wipe us all out, or try to. And this is that. So basically, the thing is, the reason that Planet Apocalypse is cool is because, firstly, it's part tower defense. That's actually laying down ambushes of soldiers to shoot at the monster, and that's a really important part of the game. So it's tower defense as the monsters come charging forward down their path, plus combat, plus you really have to cooperate with other players. Like you first aid each other, because really in real life, first aiding yourself is kind of sucky. But
Yes.
in the game, you're and there's all these things you do where you benefit other people. Like one of the characters' benefit is if you start in my area, you get an extra courage. You're also leveling up and getting advancement, and every character advances a different way. So, and also there's a whole campaign with all these levels that you can go through and, be cool with. The game is really hard. It's the hardest co-op game I know of to win. However, if you play at the basic level with the basic bad guys, I mean, my guys beat that every time now. But the very hardest level, playing against like Cthulhu or the Spider Mastermind in literal hell, it's mathematically possible to win, but I have not done it. So it ramps up from all the way. But even the easiest level is still pretty challenging.
Indeed.
First victory on a theoretical level is
if you play a co-op and you win the first time, why would you ever play it again?
True.
Yes.
True. Well, yeah. Again, it's like Kingdom Death Monster. The difficulty is part of the enjoyment of the game because it's like the game can just kill you. Like rocks fall, everybody dies quick.
Planet Apocalypse doesn't just kill you instantly. But one of the things that I have noticed is when you win in Planet Apocalypse, you always felt it went right up to the margin. Like one more turn, one more round of combat, you would have lost. You barely squeaked out the win. And I think that's highly satisfying.
Yes.
Very much so. Well, all right.
So that's what's cool about that game.
Well, we've taken up an hour of your time. I don't know how much time you have to be with us today.
Well, this is going to sound kind of weird, but the only other thing I have to do today is prepare a Sunday school lesson for some teenagers tomorrow.
Okay.
So
All right.
Petersen, the master of horror, has to do a Sunday school lesson. I don't have to do it right now, and I don't have to take a lot of time. I've game mastered so long that I am really good at making up things on the fly.
All right. Well, I will open up.
I can stick around for another half an hour or so.
Okay. Half an hour sounds good. Do we have any questions from our audience?
Mm-hmm. What?
And any from our panel?
Well, I was gonna say, you said your next hardback is going to be coming out this year. Did you say when?
I did not say when, and it depends on when. So I have one source of funding for my upcoming game, Hyperspace, which is I'm hoping will be as big a hit as Cthulhu Wars and Planet Apocalypse. It's a multiplayer strategy game. It's a 4X game. Explore, expand, experiment, and exterminate. And it has, and as has been reviewed, this isn't my words, it has all 4 X's, but in a game that doesn't take 10 hours to play like Twilight Imperium, which I love Twilight Imperium, but it takes a long time to play. Hyperspace is done in an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. And you get the full 4X experience. And again, the factions are really asymmetrical, like in Cthulhu Wars. It's cheaper than Cthulhu Wars, so even like Scrooge's like T-shirt historian can maybe afford one. Anyway, what happened is that we got this thing. We actually sent out copies of it, 50 copies of it, back in 2016 or something, and so there's reviews of it all over the place. But now the real thing is coming, and then the money we get from that is going to be used to do Big C. But we also have an angel investor who likes my games on tap, who may just pay for Big C like just up front. Get it ready to go.
It looks cool.
It'll be done in a few months. Oh yeah, you can play Hyperspace on Tabletopia.
Yeah, those models.
Oh, beautiful aliens.
This is
Yithians.
Yes. So my idea here in Hyperspace is that Lovecraft's monsters are actually aliens. So why wouldn't they be in outer space? So 5 of the civilizations are Lovecraftian. Most of them aren't, but some are. So the Yithians, and you notice this is the beetle Yithians from the future, because we're in the future. The cone-shaped things that went extinct in the Cretaceous, who needs those? Also, appeared
Who needs
was
those?
a Yadith alien, which is a super obscure Lovecraft bad guy from the story Through the Gates of the Silver Key that no one has ever done a figure of, but I'm going to have a figure of them. Also, the Beetle Yithians is a pretty cool thing. Oh, if you click on the turntables, you'll see the Beetle Yithian spinning around. And you'll notice everything has a backstory. It's like the Beetle Yithian, he has the giant jumping legs. I figured after spending 100 million years as basically snails, the great race might want to be more mobile. It doesn't have any eyes. My logic there is that they have the tapetum of the eye over their entire body so they can see everywhere. And that makes them, of course, super reflective and rainbowy, which is cool.
Oh, this guy's got Get Hostur now. Oh,
So
my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I've got to go, but it's been great. Well, listening to you, Sandy.
So you sound like you're from Australia.
England,
England. Okay. Whereabouts?
Southern England, Hampshire,
Kent?
Wiltshire sort of area.
Sussex? Okay. I have gone to England many times. Maybe one day we'll meet.
I hope so. But
I keep recommending to go to the expo in Birmingham.
Yeah, I keep meaning to go to the expo in Birmingham.
It's getting pretty big now.
Yeah. Maybe I'll see you there. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah. Cheers, guys. See you.
Take care, Grim. Okay, so here's our first question from the audience. Well, aside from the other ones, Savo, who is an artist and we love her to death, says, of all the games that have taken their inspiration from Cthulhu, which is your favorite?
So that's hard because it's like, what's your favorite food? Well, if I like lobster, I've had lobster every day. I get sick of it. But let me think of all the games. So I can't name one of mine, right?
I would
I-
hope
I
you
think-
would.
I mean,
That'd be the easiest thing to check off.
Call
Let's
of
say
Cthulhu,
not
War
yours.
seems like that's not fair that I name one of those. So if I can't name one of mine, then
Ooh, Eternal Darkness is good.
Ooh, yeah, Eternal Darkness.
I just replayed that.
I really like Sanitarium.
Huh.
Back in the 90s.
It's available on GOG, and I was actually just looking at downloading it, so it's available.
Yeah,
actually-
actually, it's very old school now, but it's a point and click adventure game, but it's pretty creepy, and not all of us Lovecraft, but the sanity thing. Of course, what's Lovecraftian? I mean, Lovecraft wrote a wide variety of stories. Picture in the House is about cannibalism. Arthur German is about a dude who had sex with a gorilla, so it's not like he has some standard thing he always does.
Um,
And don't get him started on air conditioning.
uh-huh.
That's right. Air conditioning is bad. So like that. So he does. So I really like that. I really like. You know what? I really like the Call of Cthulhu card game by Fantasy Flight. That was a lot of fun.
Really?
And the Mythos game I played a lot. I don't think it was as good as the Call of Cthulhu card game, but it was fun.
I'd say one of my favorites was probably still Alone in the Dark, the very first one
Oh yeah.
back in the 90s. Yeah, that was. I mean, because it was.
I'm more grudging with praise for video games than I am with board games and card games.
Oh, I mean, that's fair. But I mean, to me, it was the very first survival horror game I ever played. And as far as I know, it was one of the direct steals that Capcom did when they made the first Resident Evil, which, oh my God.
Yeah,
Come
they
on,
ripped
man.
things straight off.
Yep.
I had. Oh yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say I have another question if you get some time.
We're waiting on you, Petty.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Oh, sorry. We opened up the conversation, and you had said that around the time that you had first written Call of Cthulhu, that H.P. Lovecraft was still really unknown. And even I recall, like, I don't know a specific moment in time where all of a sudden I didn't have to explain to people what Cthulhu was or who H.P. Lovecraft was. Just that even when I was going through high school and graduated and on up until I think when I moved to Indianapolis, so I'm thinking like 2012 up to 2015, I was still having to explain to people who H.P. Lovecraft was. What do you think was?
You still have to if they're normal people, a lot of them. But nerds and gaming guys, they all know who Lovecraft is now.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't in the 70s. And of course, I saw less of that than probably you because of what I'd done. I was often surrounded or sought out by Lovecraft guys who I got two stories from. One is thank you for finally doing a Lovecraft game, and the other was, hey, I played your game, it was great, so now I'm reading Lovecraft.
I think that's a common experience. Is goes with Call of Cthulhu.
Gave me an award, which is a statue of Lovecraft about this high, and it was for like greatness in Lovecraftiness, I guess. But they gave it to me. They said, here's what we think. Call of Cthulhu comes out in 1981, and then Reanimator comes out in 1985. So Call of Cthulhu comes out and starts going through the gaming fans, board playing fans, and then Stuart Gordon does Reanimator. That starts circling through the film geeks, and the combination of those two different aspects of pop society popularized it. And I would add to that St. Yoshi, who did his best to make liking Lovecraft respectable among like snooty academic types. He probably did less overall than Stuart Gordon and me, but he had his part. And all these things combined is what made Lovecraft the powerful idea that he is social media.
Yeah, the first compilation of H.P. Lovecraft's that I ever read had a foreword by St. Joshi, and then of course I started seeing more and more of him, like when I would look at the film festival, because they used to do like DVDs of film festivals.
Back then, Call of Cthulhu was still paying royalties to Arkham House. Okay, I mean it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean it wasn't open. Like it wasn't. I can't really think of the word. What just happened to Mickey Mouse? He became
trademark or copyright.
The copyright expired.
Yeah.
Right?
Public domain.
Lovecraft wasn't.
Public domain.
Yeah, Lovecraft was still owned by someone. So we paid to Arkham House, who claimed they owned it. Apparently that was doubtful, but whatever. And Arkham House used the money we gave them to publish the St. Yoshi editions. So it all kind of went together.
Yeah, again, I think that's the common experience, though. Especially like everyone I know learned about H.P. Lovecraft through your game. Like that's how I learned about it.
Well, but you're mainly a gamer. I'll bet if you hung around film things, there'd be people that learned about it through Dagon or From Beyond or Reanimator.
Oh man, Dagon was really good too.
I love Dagon.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, here's my chance to pitch this. So obviously Brian Yuzna, who worked with Stuart Gordon, is the guy, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, believe it or not, a great cult type Lovecraftian movie is Silent Night, Deadly Night 4. Okay. It's this stupid slasher about a guy in the first three are a slasher in a Santa suit. The fourth is a cult of feminist witches trying to overthrow the world, worshiping bugs with Clint Howard, and it's completely bonkers. Okay.
Yeah.
Utterly different totally than the other Deadly Nights. Just it's the Halloween 3 of that series.
Nice.
If you know what I'm talking about. Okay.
I do.
And if you don't want to watch anything else in Silent Deadly Night, Silent Deadly Night 4 with Clint Howard and a maggot as big as his head, you don't want to miss it.
And Silent Night, Deadly Night 5 is almost literally the Halloween 3 of Silent Night, Deadly Night series.
Well, Silent Deadly Night 5 is when they go back, they have a robot or something as the killer.
Yeah.
Number 4 is crazy stuff, you know. So anyway, and it's by Brian Yuzna. Right, got Brian Yuzna to direct it.
I actually got a copy of Necronomicon. I had to get a German imported copy.
Yeah, it was
of Necronomicon on Blu-ray.
But there's the story in it that's there's the Cool Air story, which they always put in every anthology of Lovecraft.
Yes,
they have basically like a version of Whisper in Darkness. You know.
Oh, here we go. Daniel from Driving in Dragons. Another channel says,
"You know what I'm going to answer, right?"
Does he feel that Pulp Cthulhu drifts a bit too far from Call of Cthulhu capture that cosmic horror film?
Okay, so here's the thing. You can mix, believe it or not, you can mix comedy and horror, and the horror stays horror. Right? Yeah, right. It's fair. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, the bad guys are still horrifying, right? And but I think action does destroy horror to a large extent. Alien is a horror movie. Aliens is an action movie with horror elements, and
Yes.
I think you can make a horror movie with action elements very easily. Like Phantasm 2, which I love, once again becomes an action movie with horror elements. And I think Pulp Cthulhu, because your ultimate way of interacting with the monsters is in fact that you shoot them or blow them up, reduces the cosmic horror feel. If you're hunting cultists and shooting them down, then it's more like Seabury Quinn stories, which are actually very popular in Weird Tales. He was more popular than Lovecraft. He had his guys Jules de Grandin solving all these Lovecraftian mysteries, but he would often like blow them up or just shoot them or other things. And so he was like maybe more satisfying than Lovecraft, a lot of the Weird Tales guys. But it was not. There's a reason that we read Lovecraft now and not Seabury Quinn. Let me just put it that way. So I think Pulp Cthulhu is fine. I have no problem with you playing an action game with horror elements, but I think you're no longer going to have the cosmic horror the same way. I guess a really smooth game master can do it.
I kind of have a question for you that's I don't know, maybe a little bit closer to heart because for me, because I had a very dear friend who passed away a few years ago who was very, very big into RuneQuest. And he would always, tell me all these stories about how awesome, Greg Staffordshire was, and how, the whole world that he invented, Glorantha, was just kind of based on his search into mythology and all these things. And I thought, well, Sandy's probably worked with the guy since he worked on RuneQuest. So,
yeah, well, I did. I worked with Steve Perrin and Greg Stafford.
Yeah,
I became one of the two people in the world that was a pillar. It was Greg Stafford and me doing the world of Glorantha together. I was like the other Gloranthan guy that he trusted to know all the secrets of Glorantha.
As worlds go, and as systems go, actually, I think RuneQuest. I don't know why it never caught on because I've reviewed it more than once,
more and more, and then we sold it to Avalon Hill. Basically sold so Avalon Hill would do it, and then of course Avalon Hill was inept at everything, and eventually it kind of went bad, and now it's back. And in fact, the people that own Chaosium now are RuneQuest Glorantha fans, and they're trying to push that. But 90% of the sales are Call of Cthulhu because Call of Cthulhu is what it is, right? Yeah, I would say there's been two really great gaming worlds ever created. And one was Glorantha and the other was Tekmo. But Tekmo was always saddled by the worst game systems imaginable.
Yeah. Yeah, they were so different and so original. I mean, Glorantha was like nothing I'd ever read in fantasy. It just turned everything on its ear.
Well, here's why. Greg Stafford, growing up, didn't know of the existence of fantasy literature. He read mythology. Okay, so he was reading these books about the Norse gods, the Greek gods, the Sumerian gods. He loved it. He really dug it. It wasn't until he was like in college that he found out that there was people writing modern, what as he called it, modern mythology, like Michael Moorcock and stuff. So he never encountered fantasy. He just had mythology going for him, right? And I think that so his world is based on myth. That's why it feels so different. Everyone else's world is based on Lord of the Rings, or Michael, or some other fantasy thing, but his isn't. His fundamentally, like the gods and stuff, are and the myths that found the world are fundamental to how that world works. And that makes it feel very different. Like, for example, I can remember playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the day. Some guy joins the campaign, and I say, "So you're a cleric?" He says, "Yeah." "Well, who do you worship?" And he literally said, "I don't know, but I'm lawful good." Okay, so because who cared who your god was? And no one worshipped gods except for the clerics, if they did even, right? But in Glorantha, your cult and your worldview and your culture is like a key part of your character's way he looks at the world. So and it was quite an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, Archer Colin. Yeah, RuneQuest had vegetable elves, reincarnating dragon newts. It had
plants. I mean, they looked like humans and stuff, moved around, but they were plants. And the dragon newts you couldn't kill. When you killed a dragon newt, a new dragon newt with that same soul reappeared back in the Dragon City, so you couldn't permanently kill him. So so we didn't let you play them as a PC.
And the dwarves really were made out of stone, and
dwarves were made of stone or clay, and they were more like Norse dwarves than Tolkien dwarves. Like they were the mysterious things that lived in the hills and were kind of malign and made amazing devices. Because he never encountered Tolkien. He was reading about the dwarfs from the Norse Eddas, you know. So that's what he got. And then the trolls are a big important part. The trolls being a monster that eats you. I mean, the trolls are a monster that eats you, but they're also an intelligent race you can play.
Daz Wolfen, you never got a chance. Dude, you totally need to pick up RuneQuest. If you pick up RuneQuest, even if you don't like the lore, the system itself is so well designed. The SIZ that makes such a difference in the way your character hits things. All of the stats.
SIZ is your size stat. RuneQuest has, it's like Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest share a lot of features. Right? And the size thing, the idea is that if you're bigger, you have more hit points and you hit harder. Like in real life, you know. So like whenever I see after learning how to play RuneQuest, whenever I look at a D&D thing, and there's like this little guy fighting a giant monster, I'm like, wow, he'd never have a chance in Call of Cthulhu,
nope,
or in RuneQuest, because that giant monster would just smash him.
That's one of the reasons why Great Trolls were my favorite thing to play, because their size stats were so massive.
You know, they have the tiny little brains.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, you
They
know.
were huge, yeah. So RuneQuest, the other thing about RuneQuest and Call of Cthulhu, of course, is that it's not based on leveling up or experience points. It's your skills are improving slowly over time. So in D&D, you get XP, then you get a break point, and bink, you're better. But in RuneQuest, you're like gradually incrementing constantly. And yeah, everyone could use magic. Some guys had more magic than others. And the idea behind this was that if you took an actual Viking, he thought he had magic. He had a little magic thing tied to the end of his sword. He knew some runes he'd carved in his shield. This will help me not bleed as much if I'm hit. They thought they had magic. I'll say this chant before I go into battle, and I'll be a berserk. That's what the battle magic is in RuneQuest. Now there's bigger magic than that, but overall, even with the bigger magic in RuneQuest, although there's giant magics at the whole, like giant blocks of true stone and dragons that can shape the world like clay, the big magicians are really less powerful than in D&D. They don't shoot fireballs. They shoot like a death bolt that kills one guy.
Yep, and let's not forget the duck race. Everybody loves the ducks.
Not everyone loves the ducks. I love them, but not everyone does. So the ducks came about because Greg Staffer's doing his map of Dragon Pass, and he had a friend over and said, I need to have a town here by this swamp. What should we name it? And the guy said, his friend said, Duckburg. And he said, Duckburg doesn't really work for Grant. How about Duck Point? He said, okay, but it has ducks. And so there were ducks. And then, because the city was right next to the Necromancer's Marsh, where there's zombies and shit, so the ducks became natural enemies of undead because they were next to it all the time. And so part of the reason there was the joke that there's absolutely nothing less terrifying than a zombie duck, you know? So,
yeah, no kidding. Magnificent Devil, who's like one of our well, actually, he's one of our sharpest guests, and I always want to get him on the show. But if you want the system without the setting, Mithras is basically that. It was going to be a new edition of RuneQuest until they lost the license.
Oh, okay. Well,
the only thing I ever played that was similar to that was the Swedish game. What the hell was it?
Archer Colin, you are correct. There was a short story about a baby who ate but never pooped.
Yeah,
that was one of the short stories. There was a guy, and his name isn't coming right to mind, but he wrote a whole bunch of short stories about that took place in Glorantha, which were all written in the style of Dashiell Hammett.
I always wondered if RQ was the inspiration for Howard the Duck. I don't know about that, but Dragonbane, yes, thank you. Yes, Dragonbane is the one I was thinking, because it has ducks in it also, but they don't call them that.
They don't call them ducks. Why would you want to have ducks, not call them ducks?
They call them like mallards or something.
Every once in a while, some wise ass in Glorantha says, we shouldn't have the ducks be all funny. We should do regular ducks that look like that are like realistic looking. And back when Greg was around, he would say, nobody wants to play that. You want to be Howard the Duck or Daffy Duck or Donald Duck. That's who you want to play. So the ducks are goofy. That's the point. We want to have ducks going around with a perambulator with an egg in it. You know, that's what we want to see. And because there's no point in having ducks that are cool and realistic and like that. So, and there's always some guys that like, we have to incorporate ducks into Glanthan lore. And I did work incorporating the lore, but always made them goofy offshoots because sometimes there is a place for humor and there's no function of ducks except to be humorous.
I got another question here from Daz Wolfen. And I kind of want to jump on this a little bit too. Of all the Cthulhu genre crossovers, Cthulhu Punk, etc., that have been made, which one has worked best? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Blood Brothers 1 and 2 was probably my favorite set of adventures for Call of Cthulhu, just because it changed the way the game played so much.
My good buddy Ben Monroe, who is such a good buddy, one of my kids' middle name is Ben after him.
Wow.
Is the guy that did Blood Brothers. So I will tell him you liked his work.
Oh, absolutely.
And now I can't say there's anything else that was better because if Ben hears this, he will get mad at me.
Oh no. So no Cthulhu Punk or anything. I don't know. I thought Cthulhu Punk was a neat idea. Cyberpunk and Cthulhu. It kind of fits considering the dystopia.
I mean, for a while that was that genre of horror called splatterpunk, which I think that Cthulhu would fit right into.
Oh, big time. How about Cthulhu Tech, where it was giant robots versus Cthulhu? I think it kind of goes with
the new faction I have coming out for Cthulhu Wars is in fact Mecha Cthulhu.
Oh boy!
So it is admittedly an April Fool's faction, but we actually play. But I'm too anal to just have it be a joke. So it's been play tested. It works. It's a whole faction. Because my whole thing, I actually have a on my YouTube channel, Sandy of Cthulhu, which of course you should also subscribe to.
Yes.
Has an episode about giant mechs and Cthulhu, in which I make the point that Cthulhu is like a shape. Like if you had a giant mech, Cthulhu would. Well, in first place, the guy running it would go insane. Then the Cthulhu would ooze over the mech and use it as his skeleton, and then you'd have Cthulhu and the giant mech together as one thing. And you're probably better off not taking giant mechs against Cthulhu.
This point is made beautifully in the Neon Genesis Evangelion movie, by the way. So they find a lot of cosmic horrors in that. It does not go well for them.
No.
I did quite like Pacific Rim, despite its corny nature and the terrible acting job.
Oh, yeah, the first one was brilliant.
It's one of my wife's favorite movies.
I wouldn't say it was brilliant, but I had a lot of fun. Everything in it was the only guy who did a good job acting, I thought, was Data. Even Idris Elba was wasted. He comes in and says, "Oh, I have a fatal disease." I said, "Yep, going to sacrifice himself," and then he sacrificed himself. It's like, okay.
Well, what I thought was brilliant about it was the fact that we watched it in the movie theater, and the first thing I noticed is when the kaiju are fighting the mecha, I noticed that the kaiju would kind of like shimmy and stuff when they would get hit and stuff, and and I looked over at my friend and I said, they're imitating the rubber costumes from the Toho movies.
Yes. Isn't that
with the CG. So
that was great.
Oh, and look at this. Daz Wolfen has look at this. He says he just bought 4th edition Chaosium RuneQuest slipcover off eBay.
Money for that. So
yeah.
That's okay. Wow. So I will also say that I thought that the kaiju movies have been really up in their levels. Like Christmas Before Last is when Cthulhu -1 came out. Not Cthulhu, Godzilla.
I was going to ask you, where did this movie come out? I need to go watch it right now.
My friend came down from Chicago to see it with me. I took my 12-year-old grandson, and I was worried because I thought it might be kind of scary for him. And he's sitting there like this the whole time. And he's got a photographic memory too. So just a little treat of his. And while he's not on the spectrum, he's like almost on the spectrum, if you know what I mean. But watching this thing, I said, "Are you okay? Is it too scary?" "No, it's fine." And he's watching it. And then at the end of the movie, I'm like, "So what did you think?" And he said, "That was the best movie ever." He liked everything about it, and so it didn't matter what I thought, which I actually liked it, but because I thought nothing could be better than Shin Godzilla, and then Godzilla minus one, kind of.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait. You liked Shin Godzilla?
I love Shin Godzilla.
Oh no. Oh.
I love the portrayal of the Japanese government.
Okay, well,
how the Godzilla monster kept changing.
Mm-hmm.
I hated how there wasn't quite enough Godzilla, but his breath weapon was. I thought there
awesome.
would never be a better breath weapon, but then Cthulhu Minus One proved me wrong. And I also, because I'm a military geek, I loved all the crappy old Japanese super weapons that never got to fight in the actual war.
Yeah, that was my biggest complaint. I think that's everyone I know's biggest complaint is that there was not enough Godzilla in that film, and there was way too much, people talking in offices and stuff. Which I know that was the whole point of the film, was to show how ineffective the Japanese government was.
We just have to disagree on what we liked about it, but I did like it. I thought it was better than many of the previous Godzillas. And frankly, a lot of the Godzilla, especially as they've gone more towards CGI, there's been less Godzilla action because CGI is more expensive than a dude with a zipper up the back,
Yeah, it's also less fun. But Minus One was, God, that was such a good movie.
Oh yeah.
I've only ever cried during a Godzilla movie once, and that was Godzilla 1985 at the end.
Because it was so lame, or what?
No, because he fell into the pit, and
Okay, so I cried in the first Godzilla, when Godzilla is advancing on the Tokyo Tower, and the TV guys suddenly realize they won't be able to get away, and they keep filming.
Oh,
that was pretty good. Yeah,
that was a really good scene.
I need to go back and rewatch it. I've got the American and the Japanese version of that.
Yeah, I know it's in the Japanese version. I don't remember if it's in the one with Raymond Burr.
Raymond Burr, yeah. All right. Well, we're at an hour and 37. I don't want to hold you if you're got stuff you got to do. I
can stick it out for another 20 minutes if you can.
Are you having fun?
Okay. I'll just go. That's fine.
I mean, this is what usually happens. Is every time we get a guest on, it's like the first time we got Raven C.S. McCracken on, he was kind of like, I can give you 30 minutes, and before we knew it, he was having so much fun. He was like, and it was like 2 hours later.
I always seem to go overtime on these things. They got to get crowbars to get me out of these. I like hanging out with guys like you. I think my great flaw as a designer is that I don't think of myself as a designer. I think of myself as a fan, and everyone else, fans like me, other peers of mine. So, I mean, I'm lucky enough that my full-time job is in fact making games, but that doesn't put me like above anyone else. It's just like we all like the same stuff. I get to make games. And that's why I make games. My secret of making games is I make games I want to play.
Mm-hmm.
Other people that are cracked like me will also like them.
Well, I mean, you're the inspiration. You're living the dream that we all would like to. I mean, being honest here.
I started doing games, and then I was doing games way back when I was 11 years old. But I didn't ever expect anyone to play them except me and my buddies. But yeah, I mean, as an example, I love World War II and Civil War history and military history in general, and I read a lot about it. And I started out playing war games by Avalon Hill. Okay, I have never designed a historical war game, and the reason is because there's so many good historical war games. I don't feel a need. There's not a gap there for me to fill. Who needs another game about Battle of the Bulge? I mean, I would like to play one, but I don't need. So I have to play games that no one's done. So. There wasn't a tower defense combat game about hell rising up, so Planet Apocalypse. There wasn't a game about Cthulhu taking over the world, which is super asymmetrical, where all the factions fight totally differently. That's Cthulhu Wars. There wasn't a 4X space game that you could do in a couple hours. Hyperspace.
Yep.
That's where my game.
Just kind of going back to the old gaming thing. I remember there was 2 space games from back in the 90s that were like super, super big hits with us over at the store. And the first one was Masters of Orion 2, which I still play to this day. Because it's just that good. Damn game's like over 40 years old at this point, I think.
I will just say that Master of Magic was being done under originally Microprose's auspices, and I was very remotely involved with that. I don't get any credit for success, but I did see it in its incipience, and then of course that's what became Master of Orion. Unless I missed which is possible because it's 30 years ago. Jeez.
Yeah. Look at this. Here, the old fans come out. They remember.
Yeah, and then Master of Orion 3. What a debacle!
Oh God, that was terrible.
Oh my gosh, that was when Alan Emmerich took over and said, "I'm going to make this really great," and it was just, oh my gosh.
Oh, it was so overcomplicated.
It was so overcomplicated.
That was one of the problems I have with Stellaris right now. I loved Stellaris, and then they started adding all this extra micromanagey crap into the game, and I'm just going, oh, I can't even play it. And plus, it's like 1 billion add-ons that just cost $40 a piece, and I'm just like, no.
Yeah, some guy in a suit said they should do that to get more money. One thing, when we were doing Age of Empires 3, Age of Colonization, one of the things I said, look, we're going to be adding this new feature of favor or fame, I think it was, that let you get things from your home city. And I said, if we're doing this, we got to take something out. Take out a resource. So we know it's going to be more complicated than Age 2 anyway, but we can't keep adding stuff. So we took out stone as a resource, and we got so much flack. How come there's not stone in the game? How can I build buildings without stone? I said, dude, no civilization in the history of the world has ever failed because they couldn't get enough rocks. That's given, you don't need stone. But
the other thing was, and this is probably going to be like, fought tooth and nail, but to me and my friends, the perfect blend of a space adventure type game with everything you wanted in it was Star Control 2.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say Mutu is just civilization in space. But Star Control 2 was Star Control was my great rival when I was doing my game Hyperspeed in 1991 at Ensemble Studios with a guy who I swear was mentally handicapped as the head of development. Anyway, he was literally afraid of the developers, and if more than one of us went into his office, he would like jumpstart. And he never learned our names. He was just when we complained that we said, "Hey, this game is going to take longer to come out than you think," he actually went to the boss and tattled on us and said it was our fault. He didn't like suck it up and like, nope, it was our fault. So the one function that a boss can have, he could not perform. Anyway, I did hyperspeed, but now I get to use those same wacky aliens in hyperspace. So, I'm happy.
Nice. I do remember hyperspeed. I do remember hyperspeed actually. That was a Microprose game, and
sure
it was like, and you had a ship that you could upgrade.
You did. You upgrade your ship. You had to go trade with aliens. Some aliens, you're looking for a new home for Earth. So you're trying to find a planet you can colonize. Yeah. You're trying to find aliens that are bad, that like eat planets like popcorn. You have to blow them up and make alliances with good aliens. And
the only reason I remember that game, the one thing I do remember that game is you could get something called the Hickok Targeter that would improve your shots.
Yes. All the things were named after that kind of like cowboys and stuff like that, because I'd read a science fiction book a little before in which the robot fighter planes that they used to fight the aliens, they had downloaded the copied minds of famous humans. So they had like Jeff Stewart and Crazy Horse like this. And that's who the guys are manning their fighter ship. So of course the aliens have no chance. So I said that's a great idea. So I had a little homage to it with the Hickok Targeter.
Daniel from Driving and Dragon says, Sandy, spill the beans. Was Phalanx defeats Battleship an intentional rib? Come clean, unburden your soul.
Okay, so Sid Meier is a very simple man.
And, so no BS lines about overflow.
The combat system was every unit had a number assigned to it. Okay, so like a phalanx was a 1 or a 2, maybe. I think it was something worse than a phalanx. But it was like a 1, okay? And the battleship is like 987. So what happens is that it rolls the dice, and the battleship rolls the number from 0 to 987, and the flanks rolls the number from 0 to 1. And if the battleship rolls a 0 and the flanks rolls a 1, it wins. It's that simple. So the flank sometimes wins based on that crazy combat system.
It makes sense. I mean, when it's just straight numbers being generated, it's like, yeah, things can go either way.
Like it's if you have a fumble system in your game, like Quest does, for example, then in a large battle with thousands of guys, some percentage of your guys are going to chop their own heads off because that's just what happens. And I did once get the most glorious possible fumble ever in RuneQuest. The gamers are fighting a saber-toothed cat, and it got the fumble where it bit its own head off. And I didn't even try to explain it. I just said, we're going to live with that. And they were like, everyone was like, yay. So
we did have a guy who ran RuneQuest for us occasionally, and every time he did, he thought it was so funny that every single character got hit in the 7 on their location.
Well, the 7 is the left leg, but I guess it's close to the groin. I don't know.
I mean, he would always count it as a groin shot. So
I mean, 9 to 11 is the abdomen, so I would say that's more of a groin shot. But whatever. One of the things about the combat system in RuneQuest is that it's based on. So Steve Perrin, the designer of it, he was one of the founders of the Society for Creative Anachronism.
Oh,
so
yeah!
Wow. Okay.
So they would go out and they would fight with him and Paul Anderson, the science fiction writer. They were buddies.
Well,
so they'd go out and fight with their swords, okay? And then they'd feast afterwards. And so he knew that in an actual fight with swords, you're mostly getting hit on your arms and legs. So the RuneQuest combat system, you're always getting hit in your arms and legs, which has the side effect that at the end of a fight, like at the end of a fight in D&D, one side is completely dead, the other side is a bunch of guys with the 500 hit points left. Well, in RuneQuest, some of the guys are down because their legs been hurt, they're bleeding out of their stomach. Some of the guys might be dead, but there's a lot of wounded, so it seems more authentic. But then you always have to worry, what do I do with the prisoners? And that's a thing in RuneQuest. You take them prisoner, you get a ransom, or they take you prisoner, and it's just a whole different kind of world. But what I was going to say is something else about civilization, which is why Gandhi nukes you. Here's the reason. Gandhi got a peaceful AI. Now remember, this AI is not very complicated back in Civilization 1. It's like 8 numbers for different aspects, and Gandhi has a big peace thing. So Gandhi would be peaceful and not making military. And finally, of course, since you're a giant asshole always in the game, because that's kind of how you play Civilization, he finally gets mad at you, but he doesn't have any, but because he didn't build a military, he has a super advanced science. So all he can do really to stop you is nuke you, so he does.
I always thought that it was like a thing where, like, as soon as you get nukes, everybody gets nukes.
Well, that happens too. Like, the Aztecs don't immediately nuke you, but Gandhi does. His first thing is, his go-to thing is to nuke, because that's what it worked out for the guy. So everyone just thought that was hilarious. And then in later version Civilization, they actually put that in Gandhi to keep it going.
Eat this shit, mother.
I'd always heard it was because they had a aggression meter to it, to where he would start out at 0, but then something tricks and he goes to a negative number.
That is not what Sid told me, though it may be true.
I never did get to play Pirates.
I will say that I get the credit for the Elvises in the game. That was the main thing I contributed. You know, when your guys are out of work, they turn into Elvis.
Uh-huh.
That was me. Sid came to me and said, "What should I do with the out of work guys?" I said, "Have them be a tax collector or an Einstein or an Elvis." And default turned out to be Elvis. So
that's great.
So that is my stamp on Civilization.
Nice.
I've got one stamp on Civilization. It's got to be Elvis, right?
Hey. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Well, do we have any other questions from our panel or from our guests out there in the audience, in the chat?
So you said there's already copies of Hyperspace, not necessarily in circulation because you gave those out to reviewers.
It is on Tabletopia.
It is on Tabletopia?
Ah.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up.
And it will soon be out available. Okay, here's the story of Hyperspace. A complete, not plastic, but cardboard version of the game has been produced with the 6-player expansion. It is completely boxed, produced, printed, and sitting in Hong Kong.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh,
And so all we have to do is ship it to the US, which will probably take. They always pick like a banana boat, so it might take 4 to 6 weeks. So as soon as we get the money together for that, which we have one solid offer for the money and another less solid offer that leads to other things we also like. So we'll see when we do it, but hyperspace is coming. And you can play, the initial thing you can play is the Venge, who are sort of like the crazy ex-girlfriend race who starts out liking you and then makes or the Skith, who time travel and are totally solipsistic. They don't even realize that because the way there's only one Skith. What they do is they fugue through time. Like if you need 100 Skith to build a house, then the one Skith goes back in time a day. Then when they both go back in time a day, and then they keep doing that till they have 100 and they build a house. So they don't need to ever communicate because they already know what they're all the same guy. Then there's the Broodmasters, who are mind control blobs that sit in a hole and like manipulate and are really treacherous and lying and deceitful. And finally, there's the Fungi from Yuggoth from Lovecraft. Starting 4, and then the expansion has 4 more. Plus, it lets you expand up to 6 players.
the Skith reminds me of Mr. Meeseeks.
Right. Yeah.
Except Mr. Meeseeks can talk, and actually the Sith wouldn't. They don't even know that they're solid. They don't even know other things like can communicate, because why would they? Again, and they're horrible, brutal things, because like they go back in time and they say, "Hey, look, the Taj Mahal. Let's break it down for the marble." And the humans like they destroyed the Taj Mahal, but the Skiths say, "No, it's still there. Just go a day earlier. You'll see it."
A day earlier.
Oh my! And you watch Rick and Morty too? That's awesome.
Well, I not as much as my kids do, because I'm old and I must be grumpy. But I have watched it and enjoyed it. It's very geeky.
So Futurama Warrior style, then, huh?
What?
Futurama Warrior style, huh?
No, Rick and Morty's more my style.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
I really loved Futurama, but
There's nothing wrong with Futurama. I can't watch everything. I can't have every single hobby, so I have to choose my top one.
Unless you become a
how much longer do I have? So I figured maybe 10, 20 years. Lucky 20 years. So I figured I have board games, and I have movies.
Mm-hmm.
I have grandkids, and I have books. So if I start watching Futurama, which one of those other things am I willing to have less of?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pie is only so many slices.
You're young enough that you figure you're going to live forever and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, I don't have any children either, so I've got a lot of free time, I guess.
Have you at least had the pleasure of seeing?
He's still in the kid, not having kids.
Have you at least had the pleasure of seeing the Venture Brothers?
What?
Said, have you at least had the pleasure of seeing the Venture Brothers?
Yes, I have. Yes, I like the Venture Brothers a lot, because you got to remember, I was like 12 years old when Johnny Quest came out, and that was the greatest that had ever been done. I still have no idea why it's one season, probably lawyers, right? But man, I love Johnny Quest, and so Venture Brothers, works for me too. I love that the Monarch doesn't know that monarchs aren't deadly. That's pretty great. I love the thing where the guy buys a lightsaber. And it works just like a real lightsaber would.
Oh my gosh.
Or that they don't live longer than like a season.
Yeah, no one does. Yeah. But it's lasted longer than the actual Johnny Quest. But you know what? We now have Johnny Quest to go back to and see, because we have DVDs and stuff. So although it seems that the powers that rule the universe are trying to make us no longer have hard copies of our beloved movies and have it all be so they can erase it and change history. Yeah,
I'm not a huge fan of that.
We preach very, very hardcore on this channel that physical media is the only way. It is the way, and that's probably why
our physical media also isn't going to last forever, because like DVDs are not going to last as long as a book.
Yeah, that's true.
I own books from the 19th century. No one will own my DVDs in the 22nd century.
Probably not.
Board games work a lot that way too. If you take
board games will last. I have board games from before the dawn of time, when dinosaurs walked the earth. Yeah,
exactly.
Really old ones like Magic Realm.
Wait, so what you're saying is people are going to be playing Call of Cthulhu in 100 years, even if all of the rest of your work crumbles to dust. That's kind of nice.
It's certainly plausible.
Well, I mean, just think about it when Cthulhu finally rises from Relay, and then we're all playing Call of Cthulhu. He's like, "Oh, hey, look at that! Look at you guys go!"
Oh, they already knew. Okay, that's good.
Well, if you want to
know
see
what
how
comes
it's going
next.
to be like when he rises, you got to play Cthulhu Wars, because that's what happens when you bungle it in Call of Cthulhu.
Well, at that point, you got to start picking which sides you're going to go to and what color robes you want on.
That's right, right. Because in fact, the cultures are very important in Cthulhu Wars. And did you know it's actually possible for humanity to win? If the game ends when someone gets to 30 points, 30 doom, and no one has all 6 of their spell books, then no one gets to win by the rules. And I guess humanity wins, and you're all sucked back to your basic things. And in the 12 years of playing Cthulhu Wars, I have seen that happen 2 times. So don't bank on it.
So you're saying there's a chance.
It is possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, speaking of which, have y'all seen Underwater?
Yes.
The fact that Kirsten Stewart can't act doesn't really hurt it, because all she has to do is be scared all the time.
Yeah.
And I had surprise at the end that I dug. So
yeah, and kind of like we were talking about earlier, bring it right back to the beginning with the comedy. I think what is that guy's name? The T.J. Miller guy, and he's holding on to the teddy bear for his friend or whatever.
Yeah,
like, there's enough brevity. That's typically my games typically go that way. Like I can never run one that's Excalibur, but my games typically go the way of like what is it, like The Last Lovecraft or
Monty Python
Cabin in the Woods.
Eric the Viking.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
If you read Shakespeare, his most tragic stuff, like Romeo and Juliet, there is totally comedy in them.
Oh yeah.
All the time. Breaking us up with comedy doesn't make it not horrifying or not adventurous or not anything else. I mean, you can push it too much, like I think they did in some of the Avengers movies.
Yeah.
But you can also hit it just right, like in the Guardians of the Galaxies, which are more comedic, I know, than the Avengers, but it was right for them, you know.
Speaking of the like digital medias and stuff, and I hadn't heard of Tabletopia before. Is that a virtual tabletop program?
Yeah, it's a virtual tabletop games. There's a couple of them out. There's another one. I'm trying to think of it.
Tabletop Simulator was the one.
I think it may also be on Tabletop Simulator. Also, Cthulhu Wars and Planet Apocalypse are on those platforms.
Now, you told me on Planet Apocalypse. That thing sounds hardcore.
It is hardcore, let me tell you. And so have any of you guys seen the movie The Ritual?
Oh yeah.
Maybe a
horrible monster in the Norse woods that is absolutely terrifying.
Oh, I heard about that.
The artist that created that monster is the artist for Planet Apocalypse.
Oh, wow.
And he also was one of the artists on Guillermo del Toro's Mountains of Madness when it never appeared.
Dang it.
So the demons in Planet Apocalypse are very medieval and weird looking. Nothing like Cthulhu monsters.
Oh, man. I want Mountains of Madness so bad. That is my absolute favorite H.P. Lovecraft story ever.
I'm going to make you sad now. Why? Back when Mountain of Madness was still about to come out, I got a call from a game company in Ohio who had the license to do the video game Mountains of Madness survival exploration horror game. He wanted me to do the world and the plot and the backstory for it. And we were all getting set to go, and then Universal pulled the plug.
Rob.
And Universal pulled the plug. I'm not blaming Universal. They pulled the plug because they did Scott Pilgrim, which was a love story to all the geeks. And they said, here is the ultimate geek movie. If geeks exist, they will love this movie. And it just bombed. No one went to see it because I guess everyone's waiting for it on DVD. And so they said, well, we're not going to spend $200 million on a horror movie for sure. And so they backed out.
Well, the big issue with Scott Pilgrim was it had also come out the same day as The Expendables.
Is that right?
Yeah, which was like a tenth as good, but it had all the famous stars. Yeah. Anyway, so whether Universal was good or bad, I understand their thinking, but you missed out on not only Mountains of Madness, which is also one of my favorite Lovecraft stories, but you missed out on a awesome AAA video game, which would have been much plotted by me. So
dang it,
there it is.
That
They
is
figured
just
I was the right guy to do it.
well,
And whether they're right or wrong, who's to say? But
Yeah, Scott Pilgrim was really good too. That's really sad.
I know.
yeah. Well, we
Well,
are at
Chronos, right?
Yep, we're at 2 hours. We need to go ahead and close down.
I think everyone's here. I can take one more question, and then I will go away.
Well, okay. I'm going to hit you with one. Well, it's actually less of a question and more of a thing to tell you. It's there is a game out there right now, and since you do seem to like civilization type build-up games, it's called Worshippers of Cthulhu, and you literally are building up a cult with a great old one pit and everything else, and trying to take over a series of other islands and stuff using all your built-up technologies and everything else that you have.
It's on Steam.
It is, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Early access.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun. Yep, I recommend it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Right up my alley, really. Okay, well, thank you.
And Infinity says,
I am fine with Cthulhu by Gaslight. I've read lots of stories that take place in the Victorian times because I read old books. So I read Sherlock Holmes and other stuff. And so Cthulhu by Gaslight makes a logical place for Cthulhu to exist. And, however, because it's not modern times, it does set you a little further away and more distant. And it's not even as, in 20s, like I said, at least there's phones and cars and guns.
mm-hmm.
Go back to Cthulhu by Gaslight. Well, they have guns, but they don't have cars and phones. So you have to change a lot of things around. Like, for example, it helps if you know that you could get your mail like 3 or 4 times a day in Victorian London. So you'd send mail and expect it would get to the guy by noon. No one knows that, but that's something that is helpful for a Call of Cthulhu game, but you have to figure it out and know it. So it's a thing. So, okay, well, I'll have to see what I think of those. I love Barsoom. I read all the Edgar S. Burroughs as a kid, and now I must go.
All right. Well, thank you very much for hanging out with us. I've enjoyed this immensely.
And see you around.
All right. You take care. And everybody out there in YouTube land, you take care also. Thanks for hanging out with us on The Week in Geek. And we will see you on Tuesday with Geeks. Until then, bye-bye.
On behalf of the staff of the Independent California Motel, I wish you all sweet dreams.